Hey, welcome to Let's Talk Nation. I'm your man, Rod Levin. We have a special edition show for you this early afternoon before we go into the Let's Talk Nation live. And my special guest in the studio with me this evening, on the far end of the table, is a guy that I've known for umpteen years, known his family, known his brother, and that's none other than John West Beecham. Welcome to Let's Talk Nation, man.
Great to be here. Great to be here. Thank you very much.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about your connectivity to the town of Eatonville, but you did something else that is incredible, and you invited a guest that I was sitting here before pre-show. And man, I tell you, I've been ignorant about a lot of things, man, when it comes to the history of the town of Eatonville. And so I am so proud to introduce our guest. And by the way, there's some other connectivities to UCF. My wife, undergraduate at UCF. My oldest daughter graduated 6-7 months ago from UCF nursing school. So we got that go night connectivity.
Yes.
But none other than Dr. Scott French. Thank you for joining us on Let's Talk Nation.
My pleasure.
And Dr. French, I wouldn't do you justice by just saying Dr. French with UCF, history professor. And I'm going to delve even deeper. And again, West, man, thank you. Because before the pre-show, man, I was asking some questions and Doc Polite was kind of chiming in. I know the town of Eatonville has a rich history. But, man, it navigates, it bobs, it weaves, man. And, I mean, for folk who just go to the Zora Neale Hurst Festival and think that's it, hey, man, it goes far deeper than that. So with that, once again, I want to thank you both for being on Let's Talk Nation. And the title of this show, 1887.
Right, 1887.
Preserving
the history of Maitland and Eatonville.
There you go. So without any further ado, John, I want to start with you, man, and just open it up by saying, what is what is your goal? You know, when I had lunch with you, and the first thing you gave me was the hat. And when you talk about the town of Eatonville, man, you're passionate about it. But as I've gotten older, I deal with what I call OBB. Mm-hmm. The objective. Are there any barriers to reaching this objective, and the beneficiaries? So talk to me.
In brief, I got a vision from God probably about 15 years ago that he had some things he wanted me to do. And some of those things in that dream and vision was things that I don't do. But professionally, I am a landscape contractor. But in that vision and dream, it talked about I would be doing speaking. I would have moments like this. And when I come to those moments where I don't understand what I'm doing, there will always be an angel that would appear. One of our main objectives is how do we preserve the historic Black township. Eatonville is very important, not just to the town of Eatonville, but to Orange County. Mm-hmm. It's important to every Black in America because when Eatonville got established, August 15, 1887, it signified around the nation that you can own a home, you can own land. There's this self-governed Black township in Eatonville, Florida, where you can do what they did. And the question that rings around all the nation, all the major newspaper, how can those Negroes self-govern themselves? You know,
I tell you, that's a good opening, man. I mean, just opening conversation. For those of you who are tuned in, we welcome you to dial into the show, ask questions. We have a historian. Then we also have a native from the town of Eatonville in West. That phone number is 407-921-6195. And Dr. French, I want to ask you, we know the town of Eatonville is the oldest township, incorporated township in the United States, correct? So often I hear people talk about Oklahoma Black Wall Street. Give us a little distinction, if you would, please.
Okay, so I like to start with Juneteenth, and because that's really the beginning of the story. It's emancipation, 4 million newly freed people with nothing, right? Basically, the clothes on their back. And that's a moment when the Northern federal government is also saying, how are these people who are now free going to sustain themselves? And they met with leaders of the Black community, and they said, what we need is land. And as early as January 1865, the war is still on. General Sherman, William Tecumseh Sherman, meets with Black leaders, and several days later, he issues Special Field Order number 15, which transforms lands along the Sea Islands, all along 30 miles along the Sea Islands of Georgia, South Carolina, and and Florida, and set the lands aside. And this was sort of the beginning of the idea of 40 acres and a mule. Here was the government saying, yes, you do need something to get started. Unfortunately, when Abraham Lincoln was shot, a new president took over, President Andrew Johnson. He rescinded that order, and the lands were returned to the Confederates, to the former Confederates now, the former masters. And so the question then becomes, where do we go? How do we get a foothold? Do we stay here in sort of the same kind of situation relative to our former masters, or do we go somewhere else? And I like that you mentioned Oklahoma and the West, because a lot of people looked west. They looked to Kansas, they looked to Oklahoma, and in the 1870s there was a movement called the Exoduster movement, using the Exodus as a kind of religious metaphor, but they saw themselves going out west, and they created settlements, but they weren't incorporated settlements. That's Eatonville is going to come later, and what's going to distinguish Eatonville is it will be incorporated, chartered, state chartered, and recognized under law as a entirely Black self-governing community.
So let me put a pause in that, because that leads me to ask you some other questions. When we talk about the town of Eatonville, we talk about it being incorporated, the oldest incorporated African American township ever. We hear about the success. What about some of the other failures? I mean, and that should trigger people to ask, where else was this attempted to happen first?
Well, there were this is the important thing to say is it's not the first, obviously not the first Black settlement, but what was and John, you pointed to this, the idea that it was incorporated meant that there was a government, a civil government, where all the elected officials were Black. The mayor, the council, everybody in town. And this was, and as John pointed to this, there were a lot of eyes on this saying, can this work? And Joe Clark, one of the founders, would give interviews, and they would ask him, how do you do this? And he would tell them, as we were talking about earlier, economically, we have our own property, we can work our own land, we can grow. He grew pineapples, he ran a general store, but you could also get work in the nearby hotels, in the homes. And so there was an economic base for it. And a lot of those settlements didn't have that. The fact that Eatonville is located here in Central Florida with these newly up and coming towns of Maitland and Winter Park gave it a kind of economic base. And that's why it survived probably almost longer than any.
Okay. So, John, with that point, I mean, where do you want to see this go? I mean, we're talking about preserving the town of Eatonville. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think preserving it means there are some historical artifacts in that town. I think we start at Maitland. If you've driven on 1792, there's a lake called Lake Lily. In 1800s, it was named St. John's Hole. And that's where the former enslaved people lived, and Zora Neale Hurston write about it, in shanty towns and pretty much homeless camps. And so we start the tour there, and then we continue to track through the Good Shepherd Church, which also helped get St. Lawrence Church started. We begin to get to the town of Eatonville and point those artifacts out. How we want to preserve is around culture, heritage, tourism, and arts. And we believe that if we start that culture, heritage, tourism, and art in Maitland, because Maitland is very important in this, because Maitland is a white town settlement that's helping this Black township establish. And that's why we call it a beloved community walking tour, better together. And so when we do that, then we take that energy to Hungerford property and the rest of the town and build around culture, heritage, tourism, art. We just did a survey. Eatonville just had a survey done by the federal government that has concluded that Eatonville is truly a destination.
Destination, okay. And by being a destination, and we'll get into the tourist development tax issue.
Now, I got a question. I want to shoot in here. I'm an Orlando native, so I grew up knowing about Eatonville, not as much as you guys, but I still knew about it. Explain to people who are not from here how important that Eatonville is to not only Florida history, but on the national stage, and why it needs to be preserved.
So you want to give it a try?
Both of y'all. Who's gonna go first?
Well, I think one of the most important things about Eatonville is that it rings around freedom. We call it the town that freedom built. I think the town that freedom built, it was a safe haven. It was safe haven for every black in America when they traveled to Eatonville. When Orange County, Orlando, you speak of Orlando, traveled to Eatonville. When Daytona Beach traveled to Eatonville. When Polk County traveled to Eatonville. When Lake County, Volusia County, all those counties came, they came to a safe place. No police brutality. Black self-governance. You ever thought about that? The black governance. Where else does that exist? That sense of freedom. It is a living museum. And so that living museum is a place and opportunity for not just black people, but for all Americans to come visit and to see how this town was established. Not only that, when I'm out at Eatonville, I see people from Paris, London, I see people from Michigan, all over the U.S. coming to visit this town that Zora Neale Hurston writes. Zora Neale Hurston writes about Eatonville, and she also helped put Eatonville on the stage.
Doc, same question.
Well, that's a great lead-in, because I think Zora Neale Hurston really did, make Eatonville famous and kept it famous. And a lot of people who visit Eatonville are there to see Zora's Eatonville, because she wrote about it in her autobiography, in her fiction, Their Eyes Were Watching God, and in other pieces of fiction. But also she did anthropology. She came and interviewed the residents of Eatonville and recorded their stories and their songs, and did some really important, scholarly work there. And Eatonville's at the center of everything she did. And now when people come to Eatonville, they are often coming because they encountered Eatonville through Zora's eyes.
Yes, yes. Well, one of the things that, John, you mentioned this earlier, and I was talking to the professor about it, but Hungerford. Mm-hmm. And, when we hear Hungerford, you hear people refer to Hungerford property, Hungerford. Well, Professor, you were taking me down the trail of how, I guess the genesis of the Hungerford property.
Sure. Well, it does go back to the 1870s. As I mentioned, this is an undeveloped area of Florida. The railroads had not reached here yet. And there were some pioneer settlers of modest means, and then there were some wealthy people who came down and started to buy up land here. And one of those families was the Hungerford family, a white family from Chester, Connecticut. Edward Hungerford and his son, Robert. Robert's going to become very important here because Robert was a doctor. He was also a teacher, and he established very close relationship with the people of Eatonville. Unfortunately, he died young. He died of yellow fever, and his father wanted to memorialize him. And so this is going to open the story to some Tuskegee graduates, Russell and Mary Calhoun. They graduated from Tuskegee, Booker T. Washington's Tuskegee Institute. They were newly trained teachers. They came to Florida, came to Orlando, and they were hired to work in the public schools. But they had a bigger vision. They wanted a school much like Tuskegee that would serve the black population throughout the area. And so Russell Calhoun read something about Edward Hungerford offering land to Edward Waters College to start a satellite school here. And that fell through. So Calhoun writes a letter to Edward Hungerford and says, would you be willing to donate that land to us if we would like to create a school? And he said, I will give you 40 acres if you dedicate it to education, the education of black children. And also, I want it named after my son, Robert.
And so that's how we got to the Hungerford property.
Well, we look at, one of the reasons we fight about it sometimes is because OCPS and others say that Hungerford donated land, and he did, and that it was all Hungerford. But Hungerford also said that if the town resident match his land, donate another additional 40 or 50 acres, then he would go through with that deal. And we still have some of the descendants live today, like the Mosley family and several other families that actually made a contribution to that Hungerford school. And that Hungerford school also, it tells the story. Booker T. Washington actually came and visit the campus. Which he had at the time he had George Washington Carver on faculty at the Tuskegee. President Eleanor Roosevelt came and visited this campus. And people look at Eatonville like it's just a piece of land, but there's something significant happened in Eatonville. I mean, when we look at things like Gettysburg, it's just a bunch of green land, and people visit it year in and year out because something significant happened there.
Well, I'll tell you this: I'm very optimistic about the future of the town of Eatonville, and I'm not all that familiar with Mayor Ruthie Critton, but I'm impressed with her. I'm impressed with her leadership. I'm real optimistic, and I know there's been a lot of conversation. I saw on the news a couple of weeks ago, host dime, and everybody has a feeling about these new data centers. And I tell you, when you talk about the town of Eatonville, you talk about the richness of it. And again, I met you and your brother with your dad 30 years or some time ago. And man, I mean, just prideful folk, but also one of the focuses of everybody that I've met from the town of Eatonville has been a focus on education. Wes, can you speak to that? Because I remember sitting with your dad 30-something years ago on one of y'all properties, and all your dad could talk about is the importance of getting an education. And you and your brother was telling me about the level of education that your dad had gotten.
Well, my dad was a third grade graduate. So, when he finished in third grade, he was already had his PhD. He was ready. He was good, ready to go. He was ready to pick those fruits that Doc just talked about, but he found that Central Florida wasn't really, didn't have that Southern hospitality. I think education was more important to my dad, but I think most important thing to my dad was taking care of your family.
Family, yeah.
You know what I mean? My dad was providing for your family. He told my sisters to marry a garbage man because they will always have work. My dad, I think the thing that those people in Eatonville had more than anything was wisdom. And we know wisdom is the correct application of knowledge. Now, I think the education part is where we kind of like go to the left and go to the right. They paid a price for their kids to have an education, right? And it seems like to them, where integration comes in, the kids haven't paid the debt back. They don't remember what they went through so they can be educated, right? Sometimes we get lost and think that we did all that stuff. Education is, I like to say, like a college degree or a diploma. It takes a nail to hole in the wall. It's got to be more of the person that drives it, right? It's not about, our grandparents talks about saving, but it's not about money. It's about the neighbors. That's where the education comes in. It's about loving your community, giving back. That's where the real wealth is, and that's where the great divide is also.
So let me ask this question. I mean, and I'm going to kind of press fast forward a little bit. You mentioned the town of Eatonville being a destination. Professor, I'm gonna pass the baton to you let's talk about, because right now the big elephant in the room, if you would, is the tourist development tax, which is generated and created by visitors coming to Central Florida through bed tax. Basically, that's what it is. And by statute, it's encouraged. You can use that dollar to continue to attract individuals to this community from an economic engine perspective. Town of Eatonville. I mean, I think it's a jewel sitting there waiting for all the right pieces to come together to be the tourist attraction. So, Professor, I'm going to pass the baton to you. I mean, you know the rich history, and I know what I'm about to ask you, maybe more along the lines of opinion than fact, because we haven't seen a generator yet. But what do you think about the town of Eatonville being a destination?
Oh, I think it has, limitless potential. The problem is, and people come into town and they're waiting to find like the visitor center. They see the archway and it's very grand, but you come in and yes, there's the museum, but it's an art museum. There's no permanent Eatonville history exhibit. There's some displays in City Hall, but it's not really, nobody has invested yet enough to sort of build up that infrastructure to support tourism. People come anyway because they love it, and they will walk around and read the signage, and they will absorb as much as they possibly can, but it needs more to really sustain itself and sustain those people who come to visit.
Perfect segue. The word investment is, Wes, I'm going to pass the baton to you because that's what it needs. And when you say investment, serious investment.
Well, I think like people investing first, you got to have the vision. I like to say Uncle Walt Disney, when he came to town, he didn't have all the money, but he had a vision, right? And I think our town has a vision, right? But I think a lot of, when we speak of the government, want someone else to tell them what the vision is in the story. So what I find is that most people inside the town really don't know the story, right? They don't understand. They haven't done the walking tour. They haven't gotten a chance to visit, know how important the PEC, which is the Zoriel Hurston Museum, is important. It's not just how important that is. So that's the economic engine. But once we get the vision, we do have a vision now. We're all echoing the same word: culture, heritage, tourism, and art. And that's why we sometimes push back against developers that come in singing a different song. See, most of the developers coming in now are singing a social service hub, a medical clinic, early childhood. It's like they treat us like treating it like it's a zip code. So if you look at the 32805, which is over by Citrus Bowl, that's a zip code, so you can make those changes. The 32801 is Paramore, and where the rooming house was, so you can make those changes and you can create homelessness. And that's why if you go downtown Orlando, Paramore tonight, 8 o'clock, they're lined up under the bridge and expressway. Where did they come from? And so we kind of stopped that from happening in Eatonville. So we're having the tough discussions about how do we create something with a vision that people will come year after year after year after year. Because when you invest around history, you don't have to do anything in it.
And that's an important distinction. I'm going to tell you, because I literally watch the culture and the history of Paramore be erased as I grew up. I'm a child of the 60s, grew up in the 70s. So I saw the tragic and collapse of Paramore. When I was a boy, it had barbershops, it had restaurants, it had lawyers, it had dentists, it had a movie theater. All of that was there. It was not this urban blight. It was not, people took pride in how their houses looked. They kept their yards up, they painted, and that community had churches, and that was the hub. That was the hub of Black Orlando for many, many, many generations. That it existed. And when the East-West Expressway came and they split that community, that began the death spiral. So it wasn't addiction and homelessness. It was an intentional subjugation of that community. And knowing that Eatonville recognizes that tells me that y'all are well aware of how the playbook goes.
Yes.
Well, I'm gonna take a page from Doc, and John, you mentioned this. There's a distinction between being a producer and a consumer. And when I listen to you talking, I mean, you spoke. I mean, yeah, we need social services. There's people that have need out there, but when I look at the ability of this museum being a producer, generating revenue coming to the town of Eatonville, which in turn generates revenue. That to me is a real strong distinction. And yeah, I know there's going to be a lot of competing arms with this, but one of the things, Professor, I want to ask you, and I don't know if you prepared for this, but when you and I were sitting here before the show came on, I really had a misrepresentation in my mind about the Hungerford. So what is one of the myths about the town of Eatonville that people may think or assume, but it's not true?
Well, I think one thing is that the Hungerford property was much larger than the 100 acres that they're talking about now. It was about 300 acres. It was bigger than the town itself, and it was a thriving educational campus. And when the county bought the property was transferred to the county in 1951, they began to sell off pieces of it. And I-4 came through, and that took a lot of the land, and it divided Eatonville. So I think when you think of Eatonville and Hungerford, you might not realize, what a thriving center it was at one time. You drive through today, maybe you don't see a lot of activity, but it was a destination.
So we're having discussion on what we see now,
yeah.
But it was twice as large as it is now.
Well, you could talk also about Club Eaton, which was a destination.
Yeah, Club Eaton destination. We're kind of revitalize that now. I think when you talk about like economic impact, I think like we have a plan. We have a plan where we have proposed, and I shared with some of the investors, like a hotel. We have Traveler and Leisure there now that's doing early childhood. In North Orange County, there's nowhere in North Orange County from Orlando back to Maitland, Winter Park that you can have a wedding, a gala, or anything for more than 300 people. We have that space for that, right? We can create a main street like downtown Disney or downtown Nashville, where we can talk to Bobby Flay and Martha Stewart and say, hey, give us some chefs from New York City, worldwide chef, and let's create a cuisine on this Joe Clark Parkway that people from Sand Lake Road would drive here and want to taste our cuisine. If we look at where Host Time is today, and we talk to Orlando Partnership and say, hey, can you find some corporations like Apple or what tech corporation to fill this corridor up? So when they have their employees come in town, they have a place to stay. When they have conventions, they got a place to have conventions there in Orlando, because we are the perfect destination from that. Eatonville, economic impact for Eatonville, they get paid tourist tax dollars, they get paid tax off every door, tax off every meal, every wedding, every convention, and we become the economic home. So it is a gift that continues to replenish itself. And then we talked about putting an amphitheater in there, so we can have a concert for no more than 2,000 people. We don't want 5,000. We don't want to get crazy. We just want to keep it where some old guy like Billy Joel can come in, and then create that Zora Neale Hurston Museum. Yes, the museum is fine, but we don't want developers owning that museum, and we don't want developers telling what's going to be in that museum, because who knows, they may put Confederate soldiers in and tell us that we benefit from slavery with the climate that we live in today. We feel like we have the expertise, we have the nonprofits, we have historian professors, we have Maitland Art and History as a partner, and we could tell our story better than anyone else about historic Eatonville. We have artifacts, like on that ground today, there was a archaeological study done in 2003 by the state, and it shows that there are buried artifacts from the school in 1899 still on that land, but they want to develop on it. It's like we have a cemetery one of the oldest Black cemeteries in America that still exists, that has potential of gathering people. So we have it there, but we want the investors to invest in our story. But we want them to make money too. But I think that if you have an investor that comes in that deals with culture heritage, that deal with tourism, that can help tell that story, we all can benefit, right? We're not going to erase it. This is a living museum, and not only just for Eatonville, but for Maitland too. We're joined at the hip. Zora Neale Hurston writes in her memoir, I think Doc could tell it better, because this is something that I've learned from him and Professor N.Y. in the theory, Dr. N.Y. in the theory, is that Zora said, white Maitland and Negro Eatonville has never had an incident of any discord between the two townships. For over 139 years, Eatonville has been thriving, and it's been a great relationship. Eatonville has the lowest crime rate in Orange County.
Professor, I saw you on the edge of your seat a couple of times
too.
I was thinking that Eatonville's a very welcoming place. I think if there's misconceptions, it might be that people don't know, am I welcome in Eatonville?
Yes.
And there's the annual festival, and of course that gets a lot of attention, and it welcomes people from around the world. And so I think if anyone has a misconception, Eatonville's story is everyone's story, and anyone who loves history, who loves American history, Black history, who loves Zora Neale Hurston, they will find something in Eatonville.
So, on that note, and this is one of my punch notes to ask you, and you just kind of walked right into that for me. Who are some of Eatonville's other important figures whose stories deserve to be told?
I mean, there's so many, just like locally, Judge Brunson, Neilus Brunson, a judge in Orlando.
From Eatonville?
From Eatonville. We look at Deacon Jones, NFL great, Hall of Fame.
From Eatonville.
From Eatonville. We look at Norm Lewis, the first Black Phantom of the Opera, Broadway Phantom of the Opera, from historic Eatonville. And not only he's from historic Eatonville, on Saturday we had a community meeting, and he zoomed in and shared his opinion, shared his thoughts with us, because he also now understands how important Eatonville is. It's not just to Eatonville, but it is super important to Orange County. There's 77 million visitors come to OIA, and some of those people are making Eatonville their destination, their stop. And if we invest in that, not just as Orange County, and we invest in that, the return is greater than just a theme park. It shows that we have a good Black history corridor, because if you look at Paramore, we just mentioned, it's erased. If you look at 32805, which they claim is the worst zip code in Orange County and Orlando, it's been erased. And we just feel like that 32751, which is Eatonville, and we shared it with Maitland, is that it is the jewel. It is the treasure.
Let's talk about this. We've talked about the rich culture of the town of Eatonville, and we've mixed it back and forth when we talk about the tourist development tax and the possibility of a museum. Well, that museum, in my opinion, wouldn't necessarily just be isolated to the town of Eatonville's history. It would be related to the history of African-American history throughout. So, give me your thoughts about that, because I mean, the town has a rich history. Zora, we know, has a rich history, but African American history far expands beyond the town of Eatonville. So, what are your thoughts?
We'll let the historian go first.
Well, I mean, even if you love Zora Neale Hurston, she was someone who studied the world and traveled widely and conducted interviews with peoples from all cultures around Florida, and was recognized as a genius of the South.
Okay.
And so, you could build around that story. It isn't clear yet, what the focus of the museum will be. I know that originally the idea was for a Florida museum, right? Black History Florida, the statewide, and there's certainly a lot to talk about there.
Yeah.
And I think about the museum is like, I think like there's always room for growth.
Yeah.
But let's have a starting point. Let's tell Eatonville's story. Let's tell Zora's story, just like the Smithsonian's. If you go to Smithsonian, it says there's a spot in there that says Eatonville, Florida, the first Black municipality in America. It talks about Joe Clark. It talks about Josiah Eden, Maitland first mayor, who we got our name from. It talks St. Lawrence Church got its name from the guy that sold the land, Lewis Lawrence, the Northern Abolition, that sold land to the Blacks in Eatonville. So let's start with Eatonville, and then we're expanding that. There's nothing wrong with increasing story, because most art and museum history rotates and floats. So there's always room for exhibits of certain type, like the Tuskegee Airmen. I can see it as there's a straight tie to us. Another famous is Zora Neale Hurston. She lives there. Zora Neale Hurston talks about Africa Town, where the last slave ship sunk. She writes about the Clotilda and Mobile, Alabama. That is a connection. We got a strong connection to Tuskegee. There's so much to tell there.
Circuit.
The Chitlin Circuit.
The Chitlin Circuit.
Yeah. Chitlin Circuit is the unofficial name for the Black entertainment circuit that was very popular during segregation times. Club Eatonville was a major destination. The Quarterback Club in Orlando. People like Muddy Waters, B.B. King, and all these people would come through. Clarence Carter. Yeah. All of these folks would come through and play these venues, because back then Black artists couldn't book white venues or neutral venues many times. So the Chitlin Circuit became more or less a mouth by mouth known entertainment entity, if you will. So that I remember Club Eden.
Oh yeah,
Rainbow.
The Rainbow.
Yeah, Rainbow.
The Rainbow had just, I guess, shut down. But you know what? Here's a question. And John, you and I had, full disclosure, we had lunch last week, man, and you really helped me understand a lot of things. One of the questions here, the most important preservation question, is not whether the land has value, it is who will control that value.
Well, I think there is some tough discussion to be made. That was the purpose of our community group the other day, was discussing real talk. Typically what happens is that when...
Before you go on, tell people about the community group that you host.
Oh, the community group was a community group where we had a citizen honest discussion led by the citizens. And so we had Norm Lewis phone in from San Francisco. So he did a virtual interview. We had Dr. Scott Finch that gave us our history. And then we just talked about, he had a list of questions, asking honestly, the same question just like, who would control Eatonville? What's your vision for Eatonville? Because typically what happened is like, and this is kind of like, this is just straight facts, straight talk. When they did this in 32805, which would be the Citrus Bowl area, they used one particular group, organization to do that. They used the same group in the 32801, which would be the Paramore. They used the same group in the 32789 West, which would be the Hannibal Square. They brought that same group into Eatonville to do that same thing. So they had outcome in mind. They was leading us to where they wanted to lead us.
Let me ask you this question. And I hear what you're saying. And Doc, as well as our good friend Attorney Greg Jackson, we talk about this often. I hear you talking about these different groups that were utilized. One of my biggest pet peeves, and Doc, you know where I'm going, is can you get the individuals from the group that's being, the community that's being most affected to the table? Is my question.
Yes, I think there's always, honestly, let's straight talk again, is like trust is the most important thing, right? But you can't deny that we have never been deceived, that Eatonville is not being duped. On the Hungerford property, we talked about the Hungerford property, but that Hungerford property was taken. There was a lawsuit filed in 1958 called Quiet Title that took that land from Eatonville. In the 1930s, CPS came and helped rent the school. Eventually, they came in and ownership of the school, and the list goes on. It went over to the Florida Supreme Court, right? So it's like we've been there before. We call it the okie doke. You run that same old song with a different beat, and I think the people in Eatonville recognize that. And what they believe more than anything is that the town government will stand up for them. They feel like the town government is going to fight for them, and when the town government doesn't fight for them, they get left out, and these deals get made. And that's where we are today. It's not that the people aren't willing. The people are just, and it doesn't matter where you live. It's just the fact that when the people feel like they're not being heard, and we did this once, we did it twice, and that's why we tried what we did on Saturday, is to have an honest conversation, to let people open up their hearts. And some of the things came out like people are afraid to come out and talk. Some of the we compiled some notes that I'll share with you. They poured their heart out. They want what they want to see. They want to see some homes. They don't want to see a bunch of affordable homes. But if you look at the developers list, those things are on the list. And so, and who approves that? It all stops at City Hall and Town Hall. And our leaders must understand that it is the people that elect them. It is the people that they fight for. And the town will be saved by their legislation.
Professor, here's something that I got to commend you and John on, and that is when you're having these conversations and you're bringing subject matter experts to the table, what it also does, it dispenses with what people think they know, and you can bring facts to the table. And so I think anytime you're doing that, but one of the things that you mentioned earlier, and I think it's probably the key to everything, is trust, developing trust. Mm-hmm. And so, John, I just got to take my hat off to you, man, from the perspective of what you're doing, but also you're bringing people to the table. Dr. French, and he straightened me out earlier today with helping me have a better understanding about some of the myths that I thought or believed about the town of Eatonville. I believe it's a great town, magnificent town. And what did you mention earlier? The town of freedom?
Town of freedom built.
Man, I tell you, Doc, what's your thoughts, Doc?
This is such rich history that needs to be really something that everyone in Orange County gathers around. We've lost so much. There's no real culture. You know how I feel about Orlando, and I'm just being real. Literally, Orlando has destroyed itself as far as its culture. It really has nothing that predates the 1980s, and that's shameful. It's truly shameful, because even in Eola, many of the houses there, which were the wooden houses, I forgot what you call the style, but at one point that area was full of them, and Edgewater too. But now everything is brick and glass. Why do you get rid of your culture and your identity? And this is why it feels so transient in Central Florida. There is nothing that unites the people of Orlando. Nothing. There's no shared history. There's nothing, literally. And Eatonville is the last shining jewel in Orange County, whether people think it is or not. It has a lot of potential. I would love to see Eatonville become a destination where they can walk a walking tour, where they see people living in the town reenacting what the residents there. They can have, like, we used to call it telling lies. Old men sitting on the stoop telling stories and fables and all of that kind of stuff. I grew up hearing those things.
Hey, Doc. Doc, one of the things, as we're having this conversation, man, and winding down, the question is, who has responsibility, and I got a couple of notes here when we talk about who has responsibility. Eatonville should not have to carry the burden of preserving its national relevance by itself. And when we talk about who should be included in the responsibility, I'm going to tag team up for some of the things that you mentioned, John. I think the institutions that should be responsible for the direction, town government, of course, you mentioned that, Orange County, of which, when we talk about TDT, that's where the ultimate decision is going to come from. Orange County Public Schools, who I guess in a way has held the property over these decades. The state of Florida. Now, when I say the state of Florida, you have Representative Bruce Anton that's been engaged in this process. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give him his props when you talk about Tuskegee. He's a Tuskegee graduate. So, Representative Anton, I mean, he's been very active. And as a matter of fact, he is the one who marshaled the initial state legislation as it relates to a Black museum. I mean, give him his props, give him his flowers. UCF, come on, what else can I say? I mean, John told me about you. Doc and I did a little quick research. And Doc, we just want to say to you, we appreciate you. And to extend it even beyond that, we appreciate UCF and what it does in communities. Historical preservation organizations, foundations, and corporations, and back to your point, developers and financial institutions, they got a role to play in this. So, and last but not least, Eatonville residents and the descendants of the town of Eatonville, everybody has a role to play, but you can't play that role if you don't come out and get involved.
Exactly.
So, John, I'm going to pass Doc, I'm going to pass it to you, and John, I'm going to have you close us out.
Okay.
What's your thoughts on the town of Eatonville, it potentially being a destination? And when I say potential, I'm going to look right in the camera and say, there's a lot at stake here when we talk about the tourist development tax dollars. What can potentially take place can be life-changing for those individuals in the town of Eatonville, but also systemically, nationally, because this museum potentially can recognize Black culture, Black history throughout the state of Florida.
Absolutely. I think the infrastructure, there's a lot of buy-in already from, obviously, the townspeople, the Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community. They have 38 years of festival, and the festival always has an academic component. So you've got scholars coming in from around the world who are happy to be part of this. And I think that's the strength, really. We are always, thinking about how to continue this experiment in self-governance. What I'm really impressed with is that today, Eatonville is still a self-governed Black community. I mean, it is not entirely, it's not a segregated community, but it still represents its origins. Gotcha. And that many of the conversations about self-government are a continuation of the conversations that were being had in the 1880s and 1870s.
Wow.
Man, I think if you let Doc tell you about, like, you look at Zora Neale Hurston Festival, but there's the indoor festival too, which UCF kind of like guys and handle. Tell me a little bit like who we had, a couple of your guest speakers last year.
Oh, well, we had scholars from across the country, Yale, University of California. We had a scholar from Brazil talking about Zora and her significance in the classrooms in Brazil. It's a global phenomenon. Zora alone can draw people from around the world, but Eatonville and its story is also very powerful.
Man, I didn't even know that.
Yes, it's an indoor festival that most people don't know, but there's a lot happening.
Is there a connection between I can't think of the university that Zora Neale Hurston graduated from, but is there a connection between that school and the town?
The Barnard College, they have their own Zora event. At least they had one. I think that's the thing. It's hard to sustain this, and that's something I think that you can really credit Eatonville and its people with creating something sustainable. The festival happens because there are powerhouse people like NY Nathiri who are able to bring together a coalition of people who want to be part of it or are willing to volunteer. And And that's remarkable. She has a phrase saying it's the longest surviving cultural arts organization devoted to the culture of people of African descent, I think in existence right now, about 30 plus years. But in a small town like Eatonville, to be able to pull that off every year, it's remarkable.
Professor, go ahead, Doc. I'm sorry.
I'd love to see it grow to the size of the Essence Festival. In that vein, we certainly have enough star power in the African American community to invest in that, and they should. You have to start calling those chips in.
You're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
you do.
Hey, Professor, I'm sorry.
Sure.
How would anybody get a hold of you if they want to connect with you as it relates to anything dealing with history, but in particular, you, man, I tell you, you're a gold man when it comes to the town of Eatonville. How would anybody get a hold of you?
Well, I'm on the UCF History Department website, and you'll find under faculty, you'll find my contact info.
Okay, good enough. Thank you, John.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think honestly, see, for Eatonville, one thing about people from Eatonville, we're not cow tongue, and I have realized that I'm only going to live once, and I want to be able to not offend someone, but tell the truth. But I think our county mayor missed an opportunity to do something great for Eatonville. I know they could say, well, Eatonville don't have this, they didn't do this, and you could put the blame, but we could put a task force together, right? We could put a task force together to explore how can we invest in Eatonville. We talk about legacy, I think like the transportation bill is a good bill. We need it. But I think also you can put a task force together and say, how can we create that Zora Festival? Who can we put with the county to match up with the PEC in Wine and Theory and say, let's invest in this? I think some of our corporate partners in town has an opportunity to tell their employees that we invest in community, right? Like most of their slogans is talking about community, but those dollars don't get to Eatonville for some reason, but they get other places, right? Like we have this host time that has anchored their operation in Eatonville. Are they investing in that festival, right? And I think so. I think Orange County could do something about it too. Whether you think Eatonville has the standards that you require, but you can certainly put a task force together, a commission together to work with Eatonville. You could put the trustee board together to govern that and then help guide that so we all benefit. This is not just about Eatonville. It's not just about Black people. This is about Orange County. This is about our nation. Eatonville is American history, and they should want to invest in that in a way that will lead generation to generation. So when we have that Citrus Bowl Black Classic game, and those beautiful Black people can come over to Eatonville and hang out and smoke them a cigar and have them a beer.
Spend some money,
and
create some revenue.
And stay in that hotel we're going to build. Visit that museum. It's a story that they'll tell the world.
Yeah.
Over 2,000 years, we've been talking about that baby that was born in a manger, roamed this earth, died on the cross and rose again. It's all about the story.
All about the story.
It's all about the story. And Eatonville has the story.
Well, John, want to thank you and Dr. French for joining us on Let's Talk Nation, but more so than that, joining us, and part of solving any problem is having dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we're doing. But you know what? That dialogue has to be frank, it has to be direct, and everybody just has to kind of step back and come on. This is the time where we often say, let's check those egos at the door and look at the objective. How do we solve the objective? What are the barriers? Who are the beneficiaries of this? And so with you and Professor French coming and good friend Doc Polite, we want to thank you once again. And
invite people to my site.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry.
My website is Eatonville1887.com. You can reach us at info@Eatonville1887.com as an email. But Eatonville1887 is our website where we do a walking tour. We tell the shared history of Maitland and Eatonville. I never want to forget about Maitland, right? Maitland played a role in this. And because of Maitland and Eatonville, those two communities can create that economic corridor that will last forever.
You get more done by collaborating than you do by shielding yourself off. Wes, how long are these tours, these walking tours? What's the duration?
Oh, some say 1 hour.
You'd be lying if you did.
We can do, say 2 hours. We can curtail it now. We learn how to curtail it. But there's so much information, like if you, and you go to Good Shepherd Church, for example, there's artifacts there that you would want to see.
Well, wait,
It
wait,
doesn't feel like 2 hours.
It doesn't feel like 2 hours?
You breeze right through it.
hey, but this is a walking tour, right?
It's a walking
tour.
tour.
So what about some individuals that would want to experience that tour, but can't stand on their can't be on their feet that long? I
When
mean,
we drive and
okay.
we work
meet
with
us at the stops.
oh,
few minutes
okay.
at stop, and we work with United Arts to like get that platform so we can create some of those other vehicles. Like now they just put us on their platform with Fair Harbor and then introduce us to Visit Orlando. But our ultimate goal is to have a transportation hub that we can shuttle people. But for now, what we're doing is like we're just asking people to drive to the next destination.
Okay, next question for you. And I know we were about to close this segment, but this is an important piece. When we talk about making sure that the rich history lives on, the best individuals to take on that tour are young children. Are you doing anything with younger kids?
You know, we have this thing all planned out. Maitland has allowed me, if I come up with the money, to build a living museum around Lake Lily. I'm a little dragging a little bit, but I'm not dragging behind. I'm trying to do it simultaneously because my life is about others. Eatonville is in the need of advocacy. Eatonville is in the need of help, but Maitland has allowed me to put a living museum around Lake Lily, and that living zoo would consist of bronze statues of the founders, Joe Clark, of the shared history, Lewis Lawrence and Josiah Eden, maybe even Zora Neale Hurston, archways that said Lake Lily, formerly known as St. John Hold to the Free People in 1887. So we kind of built, we come up with a master plan where we have a bench where kids, amphitheater style, where kids can come sit from Orange County or the Christian schools to come sit out and be educated about what's happening.
Well, John, I got to tell you, man, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you're doing. Continue to do it. Dr. French, it's a pleasure meeting you. You're always, both of you, always welcome back.
Thank you.
And let us know if there's anything that we can do to continue to support what, we see the goal. The question is, how do we navigate, collaborate to get to the goal? And so once again, Doc, you got anything before we close?
No, this has been a rich experience.
Hey, thank you guys for
Doc.
joining us on Let's Talk Nation, and you're always welcome back. We'll see you next time.
Next.